Like most NPCs in the lands between, Blaidd got a pretty raw deal. He was created by the Greater Will to serve an Empyrean, much like Malekith himself, who was the famous shadow of Queen Marika the Eternal, defeater of the Godskin Apostles and keeper of the Rune of Death. This gifting of individual beastmen to Empyreans that served as potential candidates of becoming the next god seems to have been some kind of tradition, but it wasn't always the case because, as far as we know, Malenia and Miquella were not given beastmen despite also being referred to as Empyreans. Although since Miquella and Malenia are younger than Ranni, it could be that after seeing how Blaidd and Ranni worked out, the Golden Order was like, alright, we're not going to give any more shadows to any more of these Empyreans until maybe after they succeed the previous god or goddess. Or maybe they rejected their shadows. Maybe Malenia just was like, I'll be Miquella's shadow, I'll be his blade, since she doesn't seem to really think for herself outside of, what does my brother want me to do? But then when her brother gets kidnapped, where is she, But anyway. But Blaidd was assigned to serve the demigod Ranni, daughter of the Lunar Queen Rennala and the red-maned Radagon of the Golden Order, and sister of the legendary General Starscourge Radahn and the infamous Praetor Rykard, also known as the Blasphemous, whose help she would enlist much later on in the story. Out of all her siblings, Ranni took the most after her mother. She was, by all accounts, a rather morose practitioner of occult magic. When she was chosen for Empyrean status, she was given the shadow Blaidd, and the young wolf was welcomed into the Carian royal family as her stepbrother. The two would often play with the future smith Iji when they were kids, and the three presumably formed a pretty strong bond, as by the events of the game, those two are Ranni's most trusted advisors, or rather, accomplices, alongside a particularly treacherous Celavis, but that's a topic for another video, I suppose. And years later, when they were much older, when Ranni decided to plot against the Golden Order and the Greater Will, orchestrating the Night of Black Knives, an event that left at least 7 demigods dead, and also caused Morgoth to install some pretty harsh security protocols into Leyndell. But when she announced she was plotting against the literal gods, Blaidd was the first one to swear loyalty to her, despite this quite literally contradicting the very nature of his programming, which is to serve the Empyrean as long as the Empyrean follows the will of the Golden Order or the Greater Will. But since Ranni's plot went off mostly without a hitch, sea serpent monster Godwyn notwithstanding, Blaidd and Iji would relocate to the trio of towers known as the Three Sisters behind Carian Manor to serve the spirit of their master Ranni, who had in essence faked her own death to operate under the radar of the Greater Will, and now inhabited a doll body carved in the likeness of her mentor, with the main goal of bringing down the Greater Will and installing a new age, an age of night, an age of the cool moon. It's all very vague, you guys have seen the ending. Now, for whatever reason, Blaidd's programming doesn't start acting up or malfunctioning until Ranni slaughtered her set of fingers. But the first hint that we see of his programming not really agreeing with Ranni is that everybody knows Ranni is a snow witch. She learned from this mysterious snowy crone that we hear about in item descriptions. She had a cool or cold aura about her. Now, in one of my favorite descriptions in the game, it says that although Ranni was Blaidd's mistress, the cold still bothered him anyway, which, aside from sounding like something George would write, it seems to hint that Blaidd being a construct of the Greater Will or Golden Order, and Ranni's occult moon magic don't seem to mesh. Although this could just be because his sword was imbued with cold, and he was lugging around what amounts to be a giant slab of ice on his back. What did this dumb dog expect? But it was said that in defiance of the fate he was born into, Blaidd swore to serve no master but Ranni, and as proof, the sword was imbued with occult magic at the very moment the oath was sworn. This was probably just done by Ranni, but still, she valued her stepbrother a lot. She saw him as her loyal shadow, an ally who would defy destiny itself if it would have him turn upon his lady, and that's exactly who he was. And not only that, he's generally a likable guy. He's goofy, loyal, and a great fighter. Ranni loved having him around. She placed a great deal of faith in her stepbrother Blaidd. But while it was great to have turned this great construct of the Greater Will against them, it also brought on its share of baggage. There were likely some members of the Carian royal court that weren't too sure about Blaidd and that thought maybe the Greater Will and the Golden Order saw through his eyes. I mean, it wouldn't be far-fetched. We know Celavis kind of sees him as an idiot, but Celavis is fucking condescending to everybody, so who cares about that? Iji speaks extremely highly of Blaidd, but there's a bit more to their relationship than meets the eye, or at least Iji's side of it. And not only that, but he was also a source of stress for the war counselor Iji, who had crafted himself a mirror helm based on the old Nox designs, as it was said to ward off the influence of the Two Fingers, aka the Greater Will. It's no doubt that Iji was a paranoid individual, but having someone like Blaidd around who was literally created by the Greater Will, probably even shaped by the Two Fingers if that's how they create these shadows of theirs, would lead to somebody like Iji creating contingency plans on how to deal with them. And though he was Blaidd's friend, he wasn't going to let that stop him from imprisoning Blaidd for his own good. So when we meet Blaidd, he's hunting a bloodhound knight in the Mistwood ruins, which we can help him with. We can even summon him inside the Everjail, and he has some unique dialogue. But from there, he basically tells us he'll see us again. But if you don't swear allegiance to Ranni, you probably won't ever see Blaidd again. But after swearing allegiance to Ranni, you and Blaidd are assigned the same job, to retrieve the secret treasure of Nokron, the Eternal City. However, it isn't that easy. After getting advice from either Iji, Jaren, or Selen, our wonky-eyed Wolven friend learns that he has to go take part in the Radon Festival, which is a seemingly annual event held by Carrion loyalist witch hunter Jaren that brings warriors and heroes from far and wide to come challenge the great remains of General Radon, the Star Scourge, driven mad by Malenia's blight, but still a more than capable fighter. He was also the brother of Blaidd's mistress Ranni, although I'm not really too sure he knew about that. Blaidd isn't really like the smartest guy, he doesn't really seem to pay attention to a lot of stuff, but I'm pretty sure he's aware of it. The defeat of Radon caused the stars he had imprisoned to fall. One such star creates a crater in Limgrave that opens up a path into the Eternal Cities. Blaidd says he'll meet you there, but before he can make it, our Forrest Whitaker-eyed friend gets himself caught and imprisoned in the very same Everjail he had hunted Bloodhound Knight Darwell in. But not by any enemy of his, by his dear childhood friend Iji. Blaidd claims to not know why Iji did this to him, and maybe he's being genuine, maybe he really doesn't understand that his programming, despite him having a very strong will just cause him to go mad, especially if he keeps fighting it. It's tough to say exactly what his programming is telling him to do right here, but I imagine it is telling him to eliminate his mistress Ranni, since she's on her way to go kill her variation of the Two Fingers. So when Iji imprisons Blaidd like this, he's doing it for several reasons, because he's extremely paranoid and has probably been thinking about this for a long time when it was finally going to happen, but also because he cares about Blaidd a lot and he doesn't want to see him get killed by, for example, Ranni's new Tarnished champion that she just met, or worse, have to fight him himself. These aren't things Iji wants to deal with right now. He's been living his whole life in fear of a reprisal from the Two Fingers for his part in probably the Night of Black Knives, but also his continual plotting with Ranni against the Greater Will. It was indeed a very tough burden for Iji to bear, especially having all this knowledge about what would happen with Blaidd, and likely the knowledge that when Ranni departed, he and Blaidd were no longer under the protection of a demigod, which presumably led to the surviving Black Knife assassins to come out of the woodwork and kill Ranni's co-conspirators for using them as scapegoats and then discarding them when she was done with them. At least that's why I think the Black Knife assassins went all Goodfellas ending on Ranni's accomplices at the end. It should also be noted that despite all of Iji's paranoia and creating these little fail-safe plans to deal with Blaidd, Ranni still expected Blaidd to make it to her and bring her the Dark Moon Ring, which could mean a number of things. Either she was extremely naive, understandably overestimating Blaidd's will, or she was just being nice in regards to Blaidd's memory by that point. Since despite loving them and assuring herself that they made their own choices to follow her and were on board with her actions and that they knew the consequences, she did use them as tools and then discarded them when she was done to make a break for her true goal, or at least the next step in achieving it, which was killing her set of fingers, while at the same time getting the next potential Elden Lord on her side. And for whatever reason, her leaving the Three Sisters and heading to Ainsel River somehow alerted the Greater Will, resulting in them sending a baleful shadow who resembled Blaidd almost to the T, Blaidd. It was only a matter of time until I messed that one up. Except the blade that this assassin wields has been imbued with the black and red death flames of Malekith, which is the direct evidence that links this assassin to Farum Azula and the Greater Will. Now this assassin could be just wearing the Blaidd mask, or he could have literally been shaped to look like Blaidd. It's really one or the other. If he is just an assassin, I would argue that maybe he's a confessor, since they were said to do the bidding of the darker tasks of the Golden Order and whatnot. But if I remember correctly, they just specifically killed other Tarnished, who strayed from the path of grace, so namely like people who serve Mog or the Volcano Manor group. But I could be wrong, I will look into that more. I just like rambling a little bit off at the end of these videos. Anyway, whether we like it or not, Blaidd eventually breaks out of his imprisonment somehow. The first thing he does is run back to Three Sisters and try to find Ranni, where he is met by a number of angry Black Knife assassins intent on killing him, but Blaidd's superior skill made short work of the group. But after slaughtering the hapless, faceless men, or women in this case I guess, because, Black Knife assassins are women, he starts just ranting and monologuing at the sky, talking about how he's a part of Ranni's very being and that he would never betray her. However, he's immediately hostile to us, so that tells us that maybe he is a bit insane. I'm pretty sure he just went haywire once she killed the fingers. What I think happened is that his programming just went haywire when she killed those two fingers. Like perhaps his will was holding the programming back for all this time until she did that and basically fried like the motherboard or the control panel that controls all the shadows, so it just made him just kind of go a little insane. Or maybe he was able to operate freely of his programming since Ranni hadn't directly opposed the two fingers yet. I mean, she had orchestrated the Night of Black Knives and, learned occult other god Dark Moon magic from a mysterious space witch, but none of those metaphorical red flags tripped his kill protocol until she offed her set of two fingers. Again, I don't want to get too rambly here at the end, but I think that Blaidd was a very tragic character. He honestly never really had a chance. His fate was sealed the day that Radagon did Renala dirty by leaving her. Now that caused the Lunar Queen to spiral, and also caused a couple of her kids to resent the Golden Order and Radagon, and to openly start plotting against the current world logic. Rykard went about it in his own way, and Ranni went about it in her own way. Rykard even assisted her in some part. Well, those are all stories to get into on these other videos that are mostly finished of mine. But Radagon doing Renala dirty set it all into motion. It caused her kids to want to get revenge, which also resulted in Ranni using Blaidd like a pawn on a chessboard, which isn't really that bad. I mean, he was more than down for Ranni and her cause. E.G., on the other hand, was terrified of the consequences of his actions, but that never stopped him from being a good advisor to Ranni, at least in my opinion. Anyway, I'm getting off subject on this video, and that happens way too often, which is fine, but I'm going to leave things off on here because I covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in regards to Blaidd never really having a chance. And I know uploads have been kind of slow lately. I've been having a lot on my plate, but I'm going to get back up into my regularly scheduled programming soon. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And all those videos I've been working on are just about done, like the Black Noir, Ranni, my Mysterious Nights video. But there will be a couple more of these short ones in the mix too, just thrown in the middle of some of the longer ones or whatever. But as always, if you liked the video, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. If you like hearing me ramble on and on and on, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. I hope you found today's video informative. And without further ado, let us have our world famous outro. I started watching that show Animal Kingdom because I'm a fan of the movie. I didn't expect much because obviously most movies that get turned into TV shows are not so good. But man, I recommend the shit out of this show. It's really good. It's actually a relatable California crime drama.